Welcome back to Justice Reloaded HD. Today, I want to ask you something simple, but meaningful. Have you ever bent down to zip someone's jacket and realized they needed more than just warmth? Maybe they needed patience. Maybe dignity. Or maybe they just needed someone to wait quietly beside them. Our story today begins on a breezy autumn afternoon, with a jacket left unzipped, and a little boy who needed far more than help with a zipper. He needed someone to see him, not for what he couldn't do, but for the strength hiding behind his trembling hands. If you believe that sometimes the smallest acts can warm a heart forever, that even something as simple as zipping up a jacket can carry a kind of quiet love, then go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Justice Reloaded HD. Here, we share powerful stories every week. True reminders that compassion still matters, and that healing can begin with a single, thoughtful moment. It was one of those crisp autumn afternoons in Rochester, New York. The kind where the sun still glowed like summer, but the wind reminded everyone that fall was here to stay. The patio of the little corner diner was busy, filled with people sipping warm cider and chatting over plates of chili and cornbread. At one corner table, a sharply dressed man in a dark wool coat was on his phone, his voice low but commanding. That was Mr. Harold Whitaker, known in headlines as a pharmaceutical tycoon, but in this quiet space, just a man finishing lunch with his son. Next to him sat Max, 8 years old, small for his age, bundled in a puffy jacket that was only half-zipped. His hands trembled slightly, fingers twitching against the metal pull of the zipper. Max was born with a neurological condition that made fine motor tasks a daily challenge. Right now, with the wind sneaking under his coat and tugging at his sleeves, zipping up that jacket felt like a mountain. Harold didn't notice at first. He was caught in a conversation about licensing agreements, his brow furrowed, his free hand gesturing in the air. Max kept tugging. The zipper caught at the midpoint and stuck. He bit his lip, trying not to show frustration. That's when Emily Foster saw him. She had just dropped off a tray at the next table, the steam from a bowl of soup rising like breath in the chill. She noticed Max huddling into himself, shivering slightly, his tiny fingers pulling, tugging, then pausing in quiet defeat. Emily didn't hesitate. She walked over with soft footsteps and knelt down slowly, not towering over Max, but lowering herself to his eye level. Her smile was gentle, not pitying. It was the kind of smile that didn't make a child feel broken. "Well," she said with a playful whisper, "this zipper's got an attitude today, huh?" Max looked up, startled, then gave a tiny nod. Emily leaned in just a little and added, "Let me see if I can talk it into behaving." She reached out, but not quickly. Her fingers moved with calm, careful grace, like someone who knew that speed didn't help trembling hands. She held the base of the jacket steady with one hand, and with the other, she slid the zipper up slowly, 1 inch at a time. No tugging. No rush. Just patience. And the whole time, her eyes never left Max's. She wasn't watching the jacket, she was watching him. That's what mattered. When the zipper finally clicked to the top, she gave it a tiny pat. "There. All zipped. Looks good too." Max let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His smile wasn't big, but it was real. Harold, now off the call, turned just in time to catch it, that small flicker of joy on his son's face. Max glanced up at him and whispered, "She didn't make me feel embarrassed." Harold said nothing, but something in his expression shifted, just slightly. Emily stood, offered Max a wink, and walked back to the counter like nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Max, and for Harold, it was the warmest moment of the entire day. That night, as the last customers left and the kitchen lights dimmed, Emily was wiping down a booth when the restaurant manager approached her quietly. "No rush," he said, handing her a small cream-colored envelope. Someone asked me to give you this." Emily looked down. Her name was written in neat, slanted handwriting, ink that suggested both precision and weight. She opened it slowly, expecting maybe a thank you note or a lost and found receipt. But it wasn't that. Inside was a short letter. Handwritten. No signature at the bottom. But she knew who it was from the moment she read the first line. You didn't just zip up a jacket today. You preserved the dignity of someone I love more than anything in this world. Her breath caught slightly. The ink continued. I'd like to ask you for a favor. Not as a waitress. Not for pay. But as someone who clearly understands patience in a way I never could. Would you consider coming to our home, just for a few afternoons? Teach my son the kind of small things that don't feel so small to him. Things I don't know how to teach without making him feel broken. Emily stood there, silent. Her fingers curled around the letter, heart unsure. She had worked with children before, as a rehab nurse, but it had been years. And this wasn't clinical. This was personal. She folded the letter back into the envelope and tucked it into her apron. That night, she didn't sleep much. By morning, she had nearly talked herself out of saying yes. It wasn't about time or compensation. It was about what would happen if she got too close, if the boy began to rely on her, only for his world to shift again. But life, as it often does, answered her uncertainty in the softest way. The next afternoon, as she refilled napkins at the condiment station, she heard small footsteps behind her. She turned, and there was Max. He wasn't with his father. He had walked in with the restaurant hostess, holding something carefully in both hands. A piece of thick orange yarn looped through a plastic zipper pull. Roughly braided. A little uneven. But unmistakably handmade. He held it out with a shy grin. I made this, he said. So it's easier. For you. So your fingers don't hurt when you help me zip my coat. Emily blinked, the lump in her throat rising before she could answer. He wasn't offering a gift. He was offering trust. She knelt down, took the zipper extension gently, and nodded. Thank you, Max. This is perfect. He beamed. That was it. That was the moment. Emily didn't agree because of the letter. She didn't say yes because a billionaire asked. She said yes because a little boy showed up, with yarn and hope and open hands. And because sometimes, when someone that small trusts you to teach them how to zip a jacket, you realize you're being invited to something much bigger. The session started quietly without fanfare, just a few afternoons a week, in the sunlit corner of the Whitaker home where the floor was warm and the silence wasn't heavy. Emily didn't bring worksheets or programs. She brought patience, and a small canvas bag filled with zippers, buttons, and gloves. Max was cautious at first. He sat on a cushion, hands fidgeting, eyes flicking between her and the window. But Emily didn't push. She simply sat across from him and smiled. Let's start small, she said, placing one of his old jackets between them. Not fast. Not perfect. Just try. She showed him how to sit, legs crossed, shoulders relaxed, one hand gripping the bottom of the zipper while the other did the pulling. Posture helps, she explained gently. It tells your hands what's coming. Max nodded, mimicking her movements. His fingers trembled, but he didn't flinch when the zipper slipped. Emily leaned in and whispered, "We don't have to zip it fast. We just have to not give up." That line became their mantra. Over the weeks, Emily taught Max little tricks, how to hook the base of the zipper with his thumb, how to use 2 fingers instead of his whole hand, how to breathe when he felt the tremble starting. She never scolded, never looked frustrated, only smiled, only encouraged. And slowly, Max began to change. He zipped the jacket halfway without help. Then all the way. He practiced putting on gloves, first with fumbled fingers, then smoother. One day, he even folded his scarf and tucked it around his neck all by himself. But the moment that startled Harold most came one Sunday morning. Harold was standing by the front door, adjusting his tie before a rare brunch outing. Max walked up beside him, jacket already zipped, gloves in hand. Then, with quiet intent, Max reached up, and gently folded down the collar of his father's coat. Harold froze. Max didn't say anything. He just adjusted the fold carefully, making sure both sides were even. Then he looked up, waiting, not for praise, but for permission to care. It was the first time Max had willingly touched his father's coat since his mother passed away. Harold didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat tightened as he stared down at the little boy beside him, so small, yet somehow in that moment so brave. From the hallway, Emily watched silently. She didn't interrupt. She didn't step in. Because this was never about jackets or gloves. It was about rebuilding something that had been left untouched for too long. Something as simple as a gesture, folding a collar, had become a bridge between a father and his son. And Harold realized, he hadn't just invited a former nurse to help his son. He had invited a woman who knew how to make trembling fingers feel strong again. It was late afternoon, the kind where golden light streamed in through the tall windows and made everything feel softer than it really was. Emily and Max sat on the rug, a jacket spread between them, the quiet rhythm of their session almost meditative. Max was practicing slowly, his fingers more confident now, his breathing steady as he worked the zipper up and down, pausing only when it caught slightly. Then, without warning, he stopped. His eyes stayed fixed on the jacket, but his voice broke the silence like a stone dropped into still water. "Miss Emily, if my mom were still alive." He hesitated. Emily looked up, listening without interrupting. "Do you think she'd wait for me to zip my coat? Or would she just do it for me?" Emily didn't answer right away. She set her hands in her lap and tilted her head slightly, the way people do when they're carrying a truth that's both gentle and hard. "I think," she said softly, "she would have waited. Not because you couldn't do it, but because she'd want you to know she believed you could." Max nodded slowly. "Sometimes I think about her hands. I don't remember them much. Just that they were warm." From the hallway, just out of view, Harold heard everything. He had paused on his way toward the study, carrying a file he no longer cared about. Now he stood motionless, back straight, heart clenched. The voice of his son, asking about a mother he couldn't give back. The name of a woman whose warmth still lived in the spaces they no longer filled. Harold didn't step into the room. Instead, that night, he adjusted the schedule. Emily noticed first, texts from the house manager shortening their sessions. From 3 times a week to once. Then every other week. And Harold, once occasionally present in the periphery of their lessons, now observed from further away. Doors cracked open just enough to hear, but never wide enough to join in. Emily didn't push back. She understood grief better than most. Sometimes, people didn't retreat out of anger. They retreated out of fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of not being enough. And Harold, strong, brilliant, successful Harold, was still, in many ways, a father trying to learn how to step back in without losing what little he had left. The distance grew. Not in hostility, but in that quiet, aching way parents sometimes withdraw, not to protect their children, but to shield their own hearts from the things they don't know how to fix. Max, for his part, didn't complain. But he noticed. He zipped his jacket with a little more silence. He folded his gloves without announcing it. He looked toward the hallway, not for approval, but for presence. And Harold, watching from behind the wall, began to feel like a man standing outside his own house, looking through a window where the light was warm, the laughter real, but the door wasn't open for him anymore. It happened on a Sunday. The weather was unseasonably warm, and Emily had suggested they take the session outside, to the small public park just 2 blocks from the Whitaker residence. The leaves had begun their slow surrender to gold and crimson, carpeting the ground in rustling color. Max was in high spirits, wearing his jacket with the orange zipper pull he'd made himself, practicing with ease and smiling more than usual. They sat on a wooden bench under a maple tree, Emily gently coaching him as he zipped and unzipped with quiet concentration. A few people passed by, 1 or 2 offering soft smiles at the tender scene. To most, It looked like a kind young woman teaching a child a basic skill. Nothing more. But to one person, hiding behind the lens of a camera phone, it looked like a story. The next morning, a blog post went viral. The headline was cruelly crafted, sharpened for clicks. Lonely billionaire dad lets waitress play mommy to his disabled son. Beneath it, a grainy photo of Max and Emily laughing in the park. He was mid-zip, her hand resting lightly near his to guide, but not take over. The moment, innocent and sincere, now twisted into something it was never meant to be. Harold saw it before his morning coffee even cooled. It had been forwarded to his private inbox 3 times, once by a board member, once by his assistant, and once anonymously. His pulse spiked. He didn't finish reading the article. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. He pictured Max's face being passed around the internet like a meme. He imagined whispers at school boardrooms, headlines questioning his judgment, not as a businessman, but as a father. Within the hour, he made the call. Not to Emily, but to his house manager. "Cancel the sessions," he said curtly. "All of them. Effective immediately." Emily received the notice that afternoon, short, formal, and signed. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She'd seen enough of the world to know that truth doesn't always outrun perception. That evening, she returned to the Whitaker home one last time, not for a session, but to leave something behind. She placed the orange zipper pull on the entryway table, exactly where Max would find it. Alongside it, she tucked a note written in her neat, steady hand. "I didn't help your son zip his jacket. I stood beside him while he remembered that his hands weren't useless." No signature. No request for explanation. Just the quiet dignity of someone who had done the right thing, and knew when it was time to walk away. She left without knocking. Without waiting. Inside the house, Harold watched from the upstairs window, her silhouette shrinking as she walked down the driveway and disappeared into the gold of the fading afternoon. And for the first time in weeks, the house felt colder. The temperature had dropped sharply overnight. Frost clung to the grass like powdered sugar, and the wind carried a chill that slipped under coats and into bones. Harold noticed it first when Max came down for breakfast, barely dressed for the weather. He wore a thin sweater, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, no jacket in sight. "Max," Harold said, setting down his coffee. "Where's your coat?" Max didn't meet his eyes. He climbed onto the kitchen stool and shrugged. "I'm fine. But it's freezing out." "I know." Harold walked to the hallway and fetched the familiar jacket, the navy one with the soft lining and the orange zipper pull that used to make Max smile. He brought it back and held it out. "Here. Put this on." Max stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "No." Harold blinked. "Why not?" The boy's voice was quiet, almost flat. "Because no one teaches me how to zip it nice anymore." The words hung in the air like cold smoke. Harold knelt beside him, setting the jacket on his lap. "I can help you," he offered. Max hesitated. "But you don't do it like she did." "Like who?" "You know." Harold felt the sting before the name was even said. He closed his eyes for a breath, then opened them to meet his son's. "Is that why you're not wearing it?" Max nodded slowly. "I get it stuck a lot. And I don't want to mess up. There's no one to wait." It wasn't about the zipper. It never was. It was about what it meant when someone waited with him, when someone knelt down and gave him the time, the space, the belief that he could do hard things without shame. And Harold realized something painful in that moment. His son wasn't afraid of the cold. He was afraid of failing without someone beside him who understood what that felt like. Later that day, after Max had gone to school, Harold sat alone in his office. The silence wrapped around him, filled not with peace but with regret. He picked up his phone. After a few calls and one long drive across town, he found the building, an old community center that hosted physical therapy classes and outreach programs. A paper sign on the door read, "Volunteers Welcome." He walked in, suit and all, and asked for Emily Foster. She was in the back room, seated on the floor with a group of children, helping them thread shoelaces through wooden boards shaped like sneakers. Her hands moved gently, her voice low and encouraging. When she looked up and saw him, she didn't speak. Neither did he, for a moment. Then Harold stepped forward, removed his gloves, and said quietly, "I need to learn. Not about jackets. About how to be the kind of father who waits. The kind who doesn't rush. The kind who starts small." Emily studied him for a moment, reading not just the words, but the man behind them. Then she gave a small nod. "All right," she said. "Let's start with the zipper." The gymnasium was filled with folding chairs, laughter, and the soft buzz of anticipation. Banners hung from the ceiling, hand-painted by children, each one bearing the same 3 words in bright, uneven letters: "Pull with care." It wasn't a medical conference. It wasn't a fundraising gala. It was something far quieter, and far more profound. This was the launch of a new kind of program. One that didn't teach kids how to be normal, but how to find strength in their small daily victories. Harold Whitaker had funded it. Emily Foster had designed it. And Max was the reason it existed at all. The idea was simple: teach children with physical challenges how to master delicate movements that others took for granted. Zipping a coat, buttoning a shirt, tying a shoelace, pulling on socks without help. But the philosophy behind it ran deeper. It's not just about independence, Emily had explained at the planning meeting. It's about dignity, and being seen, and knowing that someone believes in your hands, no matter how they shake. Now on launch day, the room was full: families, therapists, neighbors, even a few reporters who had heard rumors of the once reclusive billionaire doing something human. Emily stood near the stage, clipboard in hand, trying not to tear up as she watched the kids, each one wearing a name tag and a smile that didn't need coaxing. Then, Harold stepped forward to the microphone. He wasn't a man used to public speaking without a script. But this time, his words were unscripted and honest. "This program was born out of a mistake I made," he began. "I believed that helping someone meant doing things for them. I forgot that sometimes the most powerful help is simply standing beside them while they learn to do it themselves." The crowd was silent. Then, he gestured toward the steps. "My son Max would like to say a few words." There was a pause. Then Max walked up slowly, jacket zipped to the middle, his little hand resting on the bright orange pull tab he'd made months ago. He turned to face the audience, so small in front of that big room, but steady. "I can zip my own coat now," he said. "I don't need help." He paused, gripping the zipper. "But," he added, his voice clear and sure, "I still like when someone stands next to me. Just in case I mess up." There was a hush. Then a wave of quiet emotion. Someone sniffled in the third row. Harold stepped forward, knelt beside his son, and pulled him into a hug, tight but careful. And just behind them, Emily smiled, softly, fully. Because for the first time, Harold wasn't standing behind a wall or watching from a distance. He was right there, next to his son, exactly where he needed to be. Sometimes, the greatest lessons in life come not from grand gestures, but from moments so quiet, they almost go unnoticed. This story reminds us that dignity isn't something we give others, it's something we protect for them, often by simply standing beside them in patience and love. For many older viewers who've raised children or cared for others, it's a powerful reminder that presence often matters more than perfection. You don't need all the answers. You don't have to fix everything. Sometimes, just waiting quietly while someone struggles, and letting them know you believe in them, is the greatest act of support. In a world that moves too fast, this story calls us to slow down, to kneel at eye level, and to offer our time more than our solutions. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that even as parents, we're always learning too. Sometimes, it's the child who teaches us how to love better, one zipper at a time. If you believe that even a zipped-up jacket can warm more than just the body, that it can heal, restore dignity, and bring people closer, then leave a like on this video. And don't forget to subscribe to Justice Reloaded HD for more heartfelt stories every week. Stories that remind us that the smallest moments often carry the greatest meaning. Thank you for watching until the end. We'll see you next time.